I'm 96, and I just recently realized that my memory has come back to me. Not too long ago, I was forgetting almost everything. And all of this happened after one simple change. No, it's not an expensive medicine or a miracle doctor. This is regular cheap food, familiar to all of us. I just started eating these nuts every day, and my memory suddenly kicked in. Do you want to know what it was? My name is Richard Hall. Friends from my youth just called me Rich. I was born in 1929 in a small town. We didn't have much, but we were well fed and lived simply. My mom baked cornbread, my dad raised chickens and a cow, and every Sunday the whole family gathered around a big wooden table. I was the third of 5, growing up as a quiet, observant boy. I worked as a mechanic my whole life. I fixed tractors, then switched to trucks. I never liked rushing. I preferred order and quiet. I married Martha, and we lived together for 52 years. 2 kids, 4 grandkids. I currently live alone in the same house where we used to plant flowers with Mary. The house creaks like my bones, but it's warm inside, especially in the mornings when the sun shines on the old windowsills. The first thing I noticed was that I started forgetting simple things. Not like when I was younger, rushing around and misplacing my keys. No, this was different. I would walk into the kitchen and not remember why I was there. I stood there, staring at the old refrigerator as if it were meant to give me some kind of hint. At first, I tried to laugh it off, thinking it was just a sign of getting older. But then, the pauses in conversation started. I forgot the name of the neighbor I built the fence with 20 years ago. I forgot my grandson's birthday. And one evening, I couldn't remember what year my brother Mike passed away. It was shocking. We were close, and I suddenly realized that my memories were slipping away like sand through my fingers. I tried not to think too much about it, but inside, anxiety often bubbled up. I was afraid that one day I would wake up and not remember who I was. At first I just felt awkward. So what if I forgot? Mistakes happen. It's all part of life. But it was getting worse with each passing month. I increasingly caught my daughter giving me sympathetic looks. She tried to hide it, but I noticed how she would check to see if I had turned off the stove or locked the door. The grandkids started talking to me slowly, as if I were a child. One day, I went out to get some bread and forgot the way back. I stopped in the middle of the street and realized I didn't recognize where I was. It was a terrifying moment. I felt my heart racing, not from age, but from fear. I only returned home because I saw my neighbor's familiar fence. After that, I started avoiding people. I stopped going to church and didn't answer calls. It felt like I was slowly disappearing, not physically, but from the inside. It's as if memories are the threads that weave the fabric of the soul. And if they break, I cease to exist. I often sat in the chair by the window, watching the wind chase leaves across the yard, and I thought, maybe this is how it's meant to be. After all, old age doesn't come all at once. At first, you'll just feel more tired. Then, your sleep gets worse. After that, you start forgetting things. Eventually, you feel like a stranger to yourself. I remembered how I took care of my mother in her last years. Her memory faded slowly and painfully. Back then, I thought to myself, just let that not happen to me. And now it has. I tried to come to terms with it. I kept telling myself, Rich, you're 96. What do you want? The brain isn't an everlasting engine. Sometimes I just wanted to close my eyes and never wake up, not from pain, but from emptiness. I knew it wasn't depression. It was silence inside. It's as if life goes on, but without you. Then, as often happens, everything changed. Not because of the doctor, not because of the pills, but due to a trivial little thing. I was flipping through an old album, the one with the faded photos, where Mary is wearing a white apron and the kids are still just little toddlers. And in an envelope between the pages, I found a recipe. The handwriting was my mom's. It read, "Walnuts with honey for memory. Start the morning with a handful." I didn't even remember she had written this. But suddenly, I could see her warm, strong hands and a small bowl of nuts on the kitchen table. We used to eat them in winter when the snow was knee-deep, and my mom would always say, "It's good for your head, son." The next day I went to the store. I bought a pound of walnuts. They were expensive, but something inside me urged me to give it a try. Could it really be that simple? What am I losing? This morning I poured myself a small handful. I didn't measure it out. I just grabbed whatever fit in my hand. I chewed slowly. The taste was familiar, almost comforting. It was slightly bitter and oily, but had that special aroma that reminded me of the warmth of a fireplace, autumns in the countryside, and hearty breakfasts on chilly mornings. I sat down at the table, as usual, in silence, without turning on the radio. One thought kept running through my mind. Is this really it? Just nuts? I couldn't help but chuckle a bit. Can you believe it? At my age, I trust folk remedies like a kid. But then I thought, what do I have to lose? No side effects, no chemicals, just food. The same food I grew up with. I kept going. A handful of nuts every morning. Not overdoing it. It felt like I was following an old family ritual. On the fourth day, I suddenly realized that I remembered where the scissors were. It seemed like a small thing, but I didn't think twice about it. I just got up and headed to the drawer in the sideboard where they were. That was the first sign. On the seventh day, I caught myself reading an article in the newspaper from start to finish without losing my train of thought. There were times when I would read a paragraph and immediately forget what it was about. But now, everything sticks in my head. On the 10th day, I remembered a dream in the morning, in detail, the color of the jacket I'm wearing, my brother's voice. It shook me to my core. I sat on the bed, placed my hand on my chest, and realized that my heart was beating steadily, without any anxiety. I was back inside my memory, not outside of it. And you know what's the strangest part? I started smiling, for no reason at all, just because hope was returning, not like a flash, but like a sunrise, slowly yet inevitably. Now, 3 months later, I start each day with a handful of walnuts. Sometimes I add a teaspoon of honey if I'm craving something soft and sweet. It's my morning ritual. I never skip it, just like brushing my teeth. My memory? I won't say that I feel like I'm in my 20s again, no. But I have returned to my home. I'm recognizing faces again. I'm not mixing up the days of the week. And I can finish my thoughts without losing them halfway through. I read the newspapers, remember jokes, and tell my grandkids stories that I thought had long disappeared. And most importantly, I feel like myself again. I haven't regained my youth, but I've regained clarity, and believe me, that's much more important. When you're 70, you're still lively and cracking jokes. At 80, you start glancing at the calendar more often and writing down why you walked into a room. And at 90, shadows come. Not all at once. At first, it's like a light haze in your mind, as if you're looking at memories through cloudy glass. And I thought that was just normal. I thought this was what old age was like. But one day, I read an article that blew my mind. It said, every second person over the age of 85 experiences a noticeable decline in memory. Not just temporary forgetfulness, but real cognitive decline. When your brain loses not only information, it loses a part of you. I started digging deeper. I found a study from Harvard School of Public Health. It clearly states, a deficiency in certain nutrients, particularly fatty acids, antioxidants, and B vitamins, is linked to accelerated brain aging. So, what happens in old age? Appetite decreases. Our diet narrows. We start eating the same things because it's convenient or cheap. And our brain, like a forgotten radio, begins to whisper more and more quietly. I remembered how, in my youth, I used to laugh at my grandfather when he mixed up his grandchildren's names. And now I found myself clenching my fists, unable to recall what day it was. At some point, it became clear to me. This isn't just about getting older. It's about a hunger, brain hunger. The statistics are alarming. More than 6 million Americans are living with dementia. Every 66 seconds, someone receives a diagnosis related to memory loss. In men over 90, cognitive disorders are diagnosed in 60% of cases. According to the same Harvard clinic, up to 30% of these conditions could be alleviated or delayed through diet and lifestyle changes. That made me think, maybe it's time to stop viewing forgetfulness as something natural. Perhaps we should try at least one simple, accessible solution instead of waiting for everything to fade away completely. So I gave it a shot, and I started to feel like myself again. When I started eating walnuts every day, I wasn't expecting miracles. But they began to happen, not like a flash, but like a warm sunrise. And here's what I noticed, little by little. The first thing is clarity in my mind. The first thing that returned was a sense of clarity. It was as if someone had wiped the dusty window in my mind. I became better at following conversations, picking up on the thread of thoughts. That foggy feeling vanished, like I was no longer listening to the world through a cotton pillow. These aren't just my fantasies. Researchers from UCLA conducted a study showing that participants who ate walnuts daily performed significantly better on memory tests, cognitive speed, and concentration. This is all thanks to alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based form of omega-3 that is more abundant in walnuts than anywhere else. Secondly, it also enhances short-term memory. I've started remembering why I opened the fridge again. It sounds funny, but it's a victory. I find myself asking fewer questions like, have I taken my meds yet? Or, have I already had breakfast? These may seem like little things, but they make up the day for an older person. Walnuts are packed with antioxidants, B vitamins, and folic acid, which nourish nerve tissue. These nutrients protect the brain from oxidative stress, a major cause of memory decline in old age. Thirdly, emotional resilience. An unexpected bonus has been that I've become calmer. Less irritation, less anxiety. If I used to lose my patience when I forgot something, now I just take a deep breath and move on. My grandchildren have even started calling me more often, saying I've become the good old grandpa again. That doesn't happen by chance either. Walnuts contain tryptophan, an amino acid that plays a role in the synthesis of serotonin, the happiness hormone. They also have magnesium, which helps relieve internal tension. Fourth, words come to mind more quickly. If I used to stumble in the middle of a sentence while searching for the right word, now my phrases flow smoothly. I started telling stories to the kids without pauses or confusion. One evening, I recounted the whole incident with Martha and the old truck in detail, complete with names and dates. And my granddaughter said, "Grandpa, you're just like you used to be." And that's what returning really means. Walnuts support synaptic plasticity, which is the ability of neurons to transmit signals quickly and accurately. This is what helps us find words and complete our thoughts. Fifth, improved sleep and recovery. I've been sleeping better, deeper. I wake up and my mind is clear. This is also a result of the nuts. They contain melatonin in its natural form. Not in a pill, not synthetically, but just as nature intended. It helps the body regulate the sleep cycle, which is especially important in old age when everything in the body can be out of balance. Sixth, support for the brain's blood vessels. I read that as we age, not only does memory decline, but the blood vessels in the brain also become fragile. After all, without proper blood supply, no memory can be preserved. Walnuts are a source of polyunsaturated fats that strengthen blood vessel walls, improve blood flow to the brain, and reduce the risk of strokes. So every walnut I eat in the morning is like a building block in protecting my mind. Seventh, simplicity and accessibility. And finally, one of the most important advantages is that you don't have to search for walnuts in exotic shops. These aren't capsules or powders. This is an ordinary, familiar product, cheaper than tablets, more natural than any dietary supplement, and safer as long as you stick to moderation. Now, every morning when I crack the shell and hear that dry snap, I think, this is the sound of memories returning. And I thank life for such a simple yet magnificent food. Everything great is simple. And with walnuts, this rule holds true 100%. I tried several options before I found the one that suited me best. But the first and foremost quality is the nuts themselves. That makes a big difference. Where to get them and how to choose the right nuts. At first, I used to buy the shelled nuts in plastic bags, but they often end up tasting rancid. They may look neat, but the flavor is like old oil. This happens because the fats in the nuts oxidize due to light and time. So I've switched to nuts in their shells. Yes, it's a hassle, but they're the real deal. I get them at the local market from a farmer named Mary, an elderly lady who collects them herself. The nuts should be large, clean, and dry. Most importantly, they must be free of mold and odor. It's better to choose slightly underripe nuts than old and stale ones. If you're buying from a store, make sure there are no cracks or spots on the shells. And don't buy mixed nuts. They're often a blend of old and new ones. How to store them. This is important. Store shelled nuts only in a glass jar in the refrigerator. Otherwise, they lose their flavor and become empty calories. However, unpeeled ones can be stored in a cool pantry. I bought myself a canvas bag, like I had as a child. Every evening before bed, I put 67 nuts on a plate for the next morning. A habit is like a prayer. How many are there? I eat 68 nuts every morning, sometimes a little more, but not in handfuls. More doesn't mean better. This isn't candy. A nurse friend of mine suggested the dosage, nuts as medicine. Too many, and it will cause discomfort rather than benefit. Sometimes I add a teaspoon of honey, especially during the cold months, or I sprinkle a bit of cinnamon on top. It turns out delicious, hearty, and gentle on the stomach. What can I pair it with? A cup of tea is great, especially with black or herbal tea without any sugar. An apple is perfect. The tartness helps with the absorption of fats. You can eat oatmeal, but I prefer to have it separately to really savor the flavor. It's not a good idea to eat right after a fatty meal. It's hard on the liver. Also, avoid snacking before bed, as it can interfere with your sleep. When is the best time to eat? For me, it's in the morning. It's the best time. On an empty stomach or after a glass of warm water. At that point, the brain, like a dry sponge, quickly absorbs all the useful information. But if you find it hard in the morning, try it at noon instead. The key is not to do it on a full stomach. And also, I always eat them mindfully. Not in a hurry, not in front of the TV. I'm sitting by the window, watching the light fall on the old tablecloth, and I feel grateful. This is a moment of silence. This is my personal memory vitamin. Over time, I realized one important thing. Even the most beneficial resource deserves respect, especially at our age. Walnuts are not just food. They are a powerful natural concentrate. This means that we need to treat it like medicine, wisely. How much can and should we eat? I've come to the conclusion that 68 nuts a day is my ideal dose, about 30 grams. More than that feels heavy. Less makes me feel like I'm missing something. This amount doesn't overload my digestion, but it gives my mind a steady, stable support. Sometimes I take a day off, especially if I eat something fatty during the day. Not for strictness, but to listen to your body. What happens if you overdo it? I tried eating more than 10 or 12 nuts. After a couple of days, I started feeling heaviness in my stomach. I've been sleeping worse and feeling sluggish. Nuts are high in calories and fat. They're not like grapes. Moreover, an excess can irritate the liver or pancreas, especially in people with chronic conditions. If there's a hidden allergy, it can lead to rashes, throat irritation, or bloating. That's why I always say, take your time. It's better to do less, but do it consistently. Who should be cautious? Those who have issues with their pancreas or gallbladder. The fat content in nuts can trigger flare-ups if you have a nut allergy. Even mild sensitivity is a reason to consult a doctor. If you have diabetes, be cautious with honey if you're adding it to nuts. If you are taking blood-thinning medications, consult your doctor. Nuts contain vitamin K and can affect blood clotting. Always check with your doctor. Before I started this habit, I asked my therapist, Ms. Davis. She looked at me, at my hands, smiled, and said, "Richard, if everyone ate a handful of nuts a day, we would have fewer clients at the clinic. But every body is like an instrument. One person thrives on nuts, while another might not tolerate them. So don't hesitate to talk to your doctor. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. We older folks often fear admitting that we forget things. We're ashamed. We hide it behind a smile, saying, "I'm just tired." But inside, there's a deep fear. The fear of losing myself. To be a living body but have an empty mind. I haven't found a magic pill. I didn't become a genius. But I can read a book again and remember what it's about. I can tell my grandchildren how I first kissed their grandmother at a dance in 1951. And if all of this brought me back to my roots, like walnuts in their simplicity and modesty, isn't that a miracle? I'm sharing my story not for publicity or attention, but so that you, who are reading this right now, can take a moment to reflect. What helps you remember who you are? What brings you back to yourself when your mind goes quiet? Share your thoughts in the comments. Has anyone else tried the nuts and noticed the same thing I did? Or maybe you have your own secret. Share it with us, because in our memory, it's not just reason that lives on. It holds everything we loved, cherished, lost, and found again. And that means it's worth fighting for.